Patel, and I'm here to talk about business, investing, the world, development, real estate, finance, all those things that make being active and alive in the world really fun. My background is in real estate, finance, consulting, law, development, all that kind of stuff. And here I am talking about where things are going and why. And one thing I'm talking about today is one of these crazy fantasies. This back. One of probably the craziest development fantasy going on in the entire world right now. A lot of people are kind of getting over this fantasy that you can just build a crazy super city that looks like a video game out in the middle of nowhere, but that is not true in one part of the world, and I am, of course, talking about the Middle East. Yes, we're going to talk about a fake city that is being hyped up in the Middle East called Neom, however you want to call it. Neom is what we're going to say, and this whole project is so wild, it will really blow your mind. So let me give you a quick taste of what this is going to be. I'll just pick any. I don't even know which one. I'll just pick any of them, which is the most ridiculous. Boom. We're looking at structures like these. Let me make sure myself. Okay. I'm just going to leave that in the background as we get started. So, yes. So there's there's a relatively new leader in Saudi Arabia. He's been consolidating power. It's the new prince. And of course, this is old school political power consolidation. The current king has lived for a very long time. So when you take over a kingdom, like the kingdom of Saudi Arabia, you can really make your mark for a long time. And Mohammed bin Salman, I think I have a picture of him for you. Let's see if we can grab a picture. It's really worth it. I guess that just goes separate. Boom. Oh no, that one's not as fun. Wait. Oh, that's lame. Yeah, it's separate. Either way, the guy you saw up there, that was Mohammed bin Salman, the current prince and functional leader of Saudi Arabia. So what's going on here? Why am I talking about this? Well, this is a special episode. Let's pull this away. I have been talking about industry for the last week. It's been about what are the industries, what is industry, where does it come from, what is manufacturing, why does it matter, what is this story about the death of American manufacturing, the great resurgence of China, what is going on in Europe, why can't they fuel their industrial machine, why is gas so important. We're touching on all of these things, and we're going to do a deep historical type perspective. But first, you just got to deal with the absolute crazy that sometimes comes up in the world. So what does that mean? Well, in the Middle East, there's just this ridiculous project, right? And it's this attempt to build a city in the middle of nowhere. And that is a pretty common story. But it's kind of different here for a lot of reasons. So industry is what made the modern world, right? You don't get these crazy, insane structures like what I saw without a real powerful industrial sector, without a industrial revolution to make all the steel, all the concrete, all the industrial tools, machines, metals, minerals, materials. Everything has to come together as part of the industrial machine to make it happen. If you want these crazy cities, you need that to happen. So that's what we're talking about today. This is a special episode. It wasn't supposed to happen, but I can't not talk about this project anymore. So we're going to do it. Let's give you a quick look at where exactly I'm talking about. This is a city called Neom, and it is taking place in the Tabuk province of Saudi Arabia. So if you look up on that map, that is in the top left. You see Jordan up there, you see Jolf, and then you see near the Red Sea, you see Tabuk in the orange. That is where this city is being built, or where it's supposed to be built. And let's see, here's a good image of what we're actually looking at. So this is an even better image. You can check this out. I don't need this right now. Yeah, so this is the Neom development, right? Really important, just breakdown of what I'm talking about. So this is supposed to be a city, right? That doesn't look like a city. That is a massive province, basically. There's that Tabuk, I believe there's a city that it's named after, and then you have Jordan, you have Israel, you have Egypt. So part of what's happening here is this is a massive political project, right? Saudi Arabia is trying to make another corner of the country viable, and it's actually trying to diversify its economy, supposedly. It's trying to make a giant high-tech center, industrial port, manufacturing complex, high technology zone, biotechnology area. We'll get into it, but this project is a collection of every single overhyped fantasy you can hear in the world today, and it's all being funded by crazy oil money. So it's actually going to go for a lot longer than people probably think, which is ridiculous, but we're going to get to see so many things break down here. It's so worth talking about. So again, Neom's here. You have the Red Sea, you have the Suez up there, you have Egypt, and you have Israel. These are two countries that Saudi Arabia is trying to evolve its relationship with. It's very important to have and it really wants to have a major piece of infrastructure on the Red Sea, right up in that northern part of the sea there. It's really important. Neom is supposed to be that city. So this is the centerpiece of the transformation that MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, wants to establish in Saudi Arabia. And a lot of this is just vanity, pure vanity. This is a new king that basically wants to make his mark on the land and is making giant projects. MBS is even calling this project his pyramid, right? That's actually what we're hearing. So he's not even trying to hide it. And what this project is also doing is trying to attract capital and investment into Saudi Arabia. It's trying to keep attention on Saudi Arabia. And it's also trying to do a lot of things at once. One of them is to maintain the perception that Saudi Arabia is really the center of the Arab world, that it's a very important part of the Middle East and of Muslim society writ large. That's a whole. All this is embedded in this project because there's a point where you can't just be an oil exporter and be all that much. Not when there's Iran, there's Turkey, and there's other really major countries that want to be involved in everything going on. So that is what we're talking about. We're talking about a giant new city in the sort of northwest corner of Saudi Arabia, basically in the middle of nowhere, that is supposed to become the most impressive city in the history of all human civilization. So if anyone thinks that is actually going to happen, feel free to say so, because that is not what we're going to see. First thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to go over some of this ridiculous project, just to give everybody a sense of how ambitious things are. And the thing that really motivated me to talk about this now is a new report came out, multiple publications, talking about the big structure that has become the centerpiece of this new project, right? There's so many centerpieces because the prince is everywhere. He wants everything to happen all at once. But the key is currently this. It is called The Line. It is a giant 170-kilometer skyscraper that goes all the way across the landscape. And it's 500 meters high. It's 500 meters high. 500 meters above sea level. It's at the top height, and the width is over 200 meters. It's massive. This is just a massive structure that is supposed to cut really just all across this corner of Saudi Arabia. And you look at it, this is one of those great renderings that you really get in architecture blogs and magazines that have kind of taken over some of our consciousness in the last 20 years. But you look at this kind of stuff, and this looks like a real fantasy. Also looks like stuff that came out of China. We wouldn't be getting as many crazy fantasies like this if China hadn't been so successful in the last 30 years in actually developing crazy things. But look at this. Here's this crazy structure. This is The Line, and you have a giant cutout. First of all, it's like glowing metallic. So imagine this thing in the sunlight. That's crazy. But you're also trying to be an entertainment complex, right? There's a massive stadium in the middle because, as we're going to get into, Saudi Arabia doesn't have much of an economy at all. It has oil, and then it has no labor force, no real functioning anything outside of its oil sector, and just rakes in the profits. It doesn't even know what to do with the money. It throws it at random projects. It throws it at golf courses and creating tours, or it just feeds it to terrorist groups, or it sends it into the American financial system, or it just sends it off to China or to Africa. It doesn't even know what to do with its money because there's nothing to actually invest in Saudi Arabia. It's tapped out, right? There's nothing to actually invest in. You've invested in your major really easy to tap surface oil fields. They're super productive, and you just mint the money. But what do you do with that money? You don't even need to reinvest it in the oil infrastructure, and there's no other opportunities. You don't have the workforce that can produce really high output, high value products in any other sector, so you're kind of just stuck. That is what Saudi Arabia, that's the kind of economic fundamental that really structures why Saudi Arabia does what it does. But this is the way things are, and this attempt to make a massive city in the middle of nowhere is really just, well, this is the fantasy, right? This is like the new project. This is where the prince and everyone, they're going to put their money into this. They finally decide they know what they're going to invest in Saudi Arabia, and they're going to invest in this crazy Neom project. And one important thing to realize is that this thing you see in front of you, that's actually a ski resort. And one of Neom's supposed economic benefits and uses is that it's going to be a zone for commerce, entertainment, recreation, all this kind of stuff. So people are supposed to come to Saudi Arabia to indulge in all sorts of fun and fantasy. And yeah, part of what's going on here is there's not as much of a China fetish going on as there is a Dubai fantasy, right? This is Saudi Arabia, in part Saudi Arabia's attempt to Dubaify the country, which is going to be extremely difficult, but we'll get to that later. But we really, whenever you see these sorts of pictures, keep in mind that one thing that isn't being shown is a lot of what really matters, which is the real human, economic, political, social, legal, operational infrastructure, the actual roots and tissue and blood and guts that actually makes a place like this work, and not just some really empty, terrible, hollow sort of environment. That is what's always missing in these modern renderings, and that is what Saudi Arabia is not going to be able to build, right? You don't have the laws or the jobs or the companies or the resources or the people or the ideas or anything else to actually make this thing a functional city. You can hire a lot of consultants and designers and planners from all over the world to work on these projects, and they'll take your money, definitely take your money, but no one is really investing. So you'll see that there's not a lot of foreign investment, real capital, real investor money going into this project because it is that ridiculous. It's actually one of the most ridiculous pseudo-economic development projects ever. I mean, I've been trying to avoid just diving right into it, but it is that bad. This is functionally a middle of nowhere desert. Let me pull this up so people can get a sense of just how bad what we're talking about here is. No, but this is useful. So this is, just really quickly, this is a map of, basically a topographic map of Saudi Arabia, and it's just going through the general height of all the land, right? So the more green you are, the flatter you are, the closer you are to sea level, the closer you are to sea level, and then everything else is more elevated, right? So this is a map of the surface features of Saudi Arabia, and everything to the east is flat, close to sea level, not flat, but close to sea level, and as you get towards the west, you get all this, you get a spine, the western edge of Saudi Arabia has this mountainous spine, right? So you actually have a lot of desert, it's all desert, and then you have a mountainous desert in the west, and then you have that, again, that small strip of coast, green, right on the other side of the mountains. That's pretty important because Saudi Arabia is not a place where anything happens, right? Manufacturing doesn't happen there. Agriculture doesn't happen there. Nothing happens there naturally. This has not been a place where anyone has lived throughout history. Let me show you actually on a quick Google map image here. Okay, so here we are in Saudi Arabia. Can you see that? Yeah, you can see that. Cool. So yeah, this is Saudi Arabia, and you can see, first of all, so Arabian Peninsula, you see Kuwait, Iraq, Syria, all of that. Here's Riyadh, the political capital of Saudi Arabia. Then you have, in the east here, you have a lot of the oil fields, that's a lot of the economic infrastructure. And then out into this mountainous region, you just have these basically east-west roads that cut through the mountains, that kind of pull it in. And then in the south here, you have Yemen, Oman, all that. But what's really key here, let me pull this in. Yeah, give it a second. Oh, there's two pictures of me right now. Why are there two? Huh. Let's just give one, right? That's fine. Let's make it bigger. You guys get the circle. Oh, that's the picture in picture. Let's switch it. Yeah, we'll keep one. Put it over there. Okay, cool. So here you see there's a lot of features. There's the Saudi Arabian shield. There's all sorts of things going on in Saudi Arabia. But gist of it is that this is terrible, terrible land for anything at all. And what you have in the west is actually Medina. You have Medina. You have basically the holy cities for Islam. But one really key thing is the port of Jeddah. This is actually, in a lot of ways, you could say this is the most important piece of city in Saudi Arabia, because this is actually where everything comes into the country, right? This is a desert wasteland, functionally speaking. No offense to Saudi Arabia. There's a reason there's been no major states that have ever really formed in this region, even though you had the ancient empires in Mesopotamia, Fertile Crescent here, and you've always had Egypt there, and even all the stuff that went on in the Levant. There was literally nothing has ever happened here until oil. It was just a tribal zone. Actually, let me show you guys a quick map. Let's pause back out of here. This is actually very interesting. So this is a map from Vanity Fair. I can't remember if there was four, can't remember which source, but it's Vanity Fair, and there were 4 different authors who were working on this. But basically, this is a map of a sort of updated map of what T.E. Lawrence, 2 sort of 19th century British people, getting them confused. T.E. Lawrence. This is Lawrence of Arabia. This is what Lawrence of Arabia said, roughly speaking, an updated version of what these scholars think Lawrence of Arabia would say, the Middle East should look like. And the gist of it here is you have the southern tribal area, which is basically the mess in the middle of Saudi Arabia. You have a northern area. You have some different emirate-type regions in a crescent around the Persian Gulf. You have the Hejaz here, which is that mountainous west, and you have further tribal areas in the Sinai. And basically, tribal areas just functionally, it just means an area that you can't really integrate politically. It doesn't have an economic base. It has a very nomadic and often tribal social structure, and you're kind of stuck with it. There's not much you can do, and a lot hasn't really changed. But getting back to Jeddah, this port is where once you had the money in Saudi Arabia, you had all the oil, you could actually import things to make anything possible, to build cities, to do everything. And most everything comes through Jeddah. This is one of the major ports in the region, and it's on the Red Sea, deep water port. Actually, a lot of junk in the harbor area. It's really not the best port, although it does look like it has a bit of a cut up there. But still, this is a major port. Really, the major port in Saudi Arabia. If that was closed, it would be very hard for almost anything in this country to function. So the competition is obviously with Iran on the other, on the other sea in the Persian Gulf, and that's a bit more of a challenge. But the key city over here, Jeddah, is relatively insulated from that. But way up here, this is where Neom is supposed to be built. And if you look at it, it's unclear why anyone would say that anything should ever be built here. Nobody would look at this and think, wow, we should build something. This is a rocky, sandy bit of nothing. It's really kind of the only way to describe this. But what it is a rocky, sandy, pointy bit of nothing, pretty close to Egypt and Israel. So up here you have the Israeli port of Eilat, which is an Israeli port on the Red Sea. That's relatively, that's a nearby place. And of course you have the Suez Canal, more importantly, and integration into Egypt. Just to be clear, we all see the difference here. Here you see the Green Nile, which has had civilization for 5,000 years, over 5,000 years, and you see this here, nothing comparable. This is again what I was saying, where you just cannot have even something approaching real life in Saudi Arabia without really without oil. And this really gets back to this question of industry week, of why industry is where it is where it isn't. The the thing that makes all industry anywhere possible is energy, and one of the most useful forms of energy for over 100 years has been oil. And oil just, it makes everything work. And there's obviously all these stories, and everyone's wishing we get off oil. We're not going to get off oil anytime soon. And as long as Saudi Arabia has oil, it has a key role, a premier role in the global industrial system, and it can get basically whatever it wants. I mean, so long as no one tries to just take it over, right? Basically, in the last 75 years, it's been protected by the United States to prop things up. So Saudi Arabia has just been able to rake in the money, sell to everybody. It really has this privileged position in the world, and that's what lets it indulge in crazy fantasies like building Neom in the middle of the desert. So let's actually just look at this again. I pulled this up. It's so ridiculous that it's so worth going over. Great. Yep, so this is some of the marketing for Neom. So Neom is one of the most slickly marketed things you can imagine. It has endless rendering. Just look at this. Oh my God. This is a video game. These are vertical farms. They're trying to explain how they're going to actually feed everybody in this region, how they're going to keep them entertained, why are they going to go there. Oh my God, all this stuff. How it is actually environmentally friendly, right? That's what we're also learning. All these brand partners, look, it's supported by all these great names, effective people, great thinkers, etc., etc., etc. But let's get to the regions. Okay. Let's start with this. It's worth going over, guys. You've never seen anything so ridiculous in your life. It just doesn't exist. So this is now Chohena. Notice the marketing, outdoor adventure. You're going to be skiing and snowboarding in Saudi Arabia. That's right. Yep, you're going to be skiing and snowboarding in Saudi Arabia. And of course, there'll be crazy sailing as well. Oh yeah, look at that. I mean, they're just going to take off into space. Jesus Christ. Yeah, so look at this marketing. This is a combination of basically space age architecture, wellness. Oh, look at all this wellness stuff. So it's basically looking at that well-traveled, our modern version of the jet set group, which goes to Bali and goes to places like that. Here you have these, again, crazy structures where they're talking about outdoor events. You're going to have all year round events, music festivals, film festivals. There's multiple seasons. You'll be doing that in the winter, and then you'll come for the paragliding and mountain biking and the yoga retreats, further cultural events, music festivals, food, all those things that Saudi Arabia is so known for, right? And here, of course, you have a structure straight out of a Star Wars movie. And anyway, this is the point of it, right? The point of what I'm getting at is that this marketing looks like a video game. It was hired by people who are just able to create whatever they want, and they're really selling, MBS himself on all of these ridiculous structures, ridiculous amenities, ridiculous projects that can't really pencil out. There is no major consumer class in Saudi Arabia outside of a small percentage. So the only people who are going to come here to fill all this up is going to be the global elite, which, if anyone knows anything about Saudi Arabia and its position in the world and how well it's liked, that's just not going to happen. But nonetheless, you have all these hotels, you have all these indoor and outdoor experience, health, wellness, etc., hikes, outdoor recreation. This is supposed to be a grand new entertainment zone, really. That's the sort of entertainment zone that the world is supposed to partake in, right? And then we have the Octagon. Oh my God. So now this is not just Saudi Arabia building the future, but it's building the future beyond oil, right? It's trying to diversify itself beyond this. Of course, there is no major robotics industry in Saudi Arabia. There's no major biotechnology industry in Saudi Arabia. There's no major any sort of industry in Saudi Arabia, and there's not going to be investment for this either. but the sell is beautiful. Like a lot of things, you can just, if you can sell it, you can make it happen. But so just look at this, Industry 4.0. This is a buzzword, and it got big in Germany in the last 10 years. It's about all the transformations to industry that are coming. So you have integrated supply chains. This is a massive deep water port. This structure, let's see if it'll pop up. Anyway, yeah, the Octagon, right? So this is part industrial zone, part deep water port. This is actually a competition. Like, this is supposed to be a port, way beyond a port, but this is supposed to be a complex that will outcompete Jeddah itself, right? So if we go back here, here's the port of Jeddah, the real part of the real spine of Saudi Arabia. Very pedestrian when you look at that other thing. It's just a normal industrial deep water port. That's fine. Then you get to the Octagon, 7 kilometers, the largest floating structure in the world. What this actually means is that there's probably I haven't actually looked, but there's probably problems with dredging, with actually getting the depth you need for a lot of this work. That's a common problem, and a lot of places don't have good natural harbors. But it's trying to get some of the trade that always flows through. Suez is trying to take its cut of everything going on. It basically wants to become something like a Singapore, but nobody's ever going to pass through this. And you already have the port of Jeddah just a bit lower in the whole plan here. Ooh, let's see actually. Oh no, it popped it up. Let's see if that works. That didn't work. Ooh, there it is. Here, so let's check this out. Yep. So there's not actually a good location for this. Look, it's just rocks, mountains, etc. They have to completely create this structure. I mean, this is deep water port construction in an absolutely ridiculous way. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to actually go through all of this project because so much of it is so fantastical at once. Airports, high-speed rail lines, real ports, it wants everything. But yeah, there's the airport and the line. Well, it makes sense. Yeah, so this is you're supposed to be able to just cruise right through it along your journey into Saudi Arabia. But we're not going to go too much more into this. The idea here is just that Saudi Arabia is trying to create not just an entertainment zone, not just a massive new port complex, not just an industrial zone, but iconic, pharaoh-like structures that will all interconnect, etc., etc. But the key problem here, of course, is that there is not a single industry that's going to locate in the middle of nowhere, connected to nothing, because there's no hinterland for any of this stuff. Well, let's get into it. We'll go into that in a second. Let's do this. This is just this last one. This is the most ridiculous of all. It's worth doing. This is what was recently revealed. It's called the Line. We were looking at this earlier. No roads, cars, or emissions, right? It's just going to be trains, a giant single structure where everyone takes the train. All right, this is actually, if you think about this, this is an evolution of a certain green vision that emerged in Western Europe and North America in the last 50 years, particularly in the last 20, where you're trying to make a harmonious, eco-friendly, post-industrial or green industrial world. I mean, you look at this, all of this visual copy, basically, right? All these images, they're all green, 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 glowing and green, even though Saudi Arabia is totally desert, right? What no one's mentioning here is that none of this naturally grows in Saudi Arabia. All of it will require massive, massive amounts of energy to work. So you'd have to, it could all be solar panels, but it's not really like that. So world-class quality of life, it's actually a solution to all the problems of urbanism in the industrial world, and on and on and on. And then, of course, you just look at this image. I mean, this is straight up a video game, and these look like Japanese mangas. So it is vertical urbanism. Da-da-da. They're actually really trying to sell it as look at this, Howard Manhattan. Let's check it out. see if we can be convinced that all of Manhattan should be transformed into a single building where everyone lives together. Oh, it is good. It is well done, though, because you're replacing everything with greenery. That's this. It's really a new, again, the architect who's working on this, for people who don't know, it's a Thomas Maine from I believe a Los Angeles company named Morphosis. Yeah, that's actually really well done. This is actually going to appeal to a lot of people. So this is all often what happens when you have, I'll go back to myself real quick. Yeah, often when you have these sort of random dictators that are putting out these giant pet projects, they actually are very smart, and they often appeal and tap into many beliefs and values and aspirations that advanced professionals in the Western world really grab onto. So even though they're dealing with a pretty bad dude out in Saudi Arabia, they will still buy in that everything can be transformed, and you can do this, you can do that, it'll be green, it'll be better, the world will be harmonious, etc. You're either taking the money or you're drinking a bit of this Kool-Aid oftentimes. So that is what's going to happen. But we need to get back down to the reality here, that this is that line structure. And here's Neom. Here's a zoomed in version of that part of Saudi Arabia we're looking at. Notice what it even says. This is from the Neom website. This isn't me just making it up. That's the coastal desert. That's one part of it. Then you have the mountains. Then you have the upper valley. You don't have a port. You don't have a natural harbor. You don't have a river. You don't have any plains. You don't have any flat ground. You don't have any precipitation. You have literally none of the things that would allow, in any other time in history, even a smattering of people to congregate there in more than just small tribes. Yet, they are trying to build structures that will house millions and millions of people. This is so far removed from reality, it's actually crazy. This is a middle of nowhere desert mountain wasteland with no consumer economy, no resources, no indigenous labor force, no design or operational skill set to build any of this, no actual supplies or industrial systems for development or management, none of this. Literally nothing is here. And China kind of made this stuff look a lot easier than it is. But without oil money, this whole thing would be so much a pipe dream. It is ridiculous. And even with all this money, it's still never actually going to make it. And there's a great little picture that really shows you some of the hilarious challenge. Let's see if I can pull this up. There it is. So this, if you remember that image of the ski resort with a giant pool of water and all that, this is what it actually looks like. It is a rocky, sandy, hazy, hilly, dusty wasteland. That is where the hope of Saudi Arabia will spring eternal, spring anew. As you can imagine, this stuff is crazy, 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 crazy talk. But we need a bit of context for why this is even a thing. And again, this gets back to industry, this gets back to Industry Week, and this gets back to what exactly this world we're living in is about, where it came from and where it's headed. So cities are not what they used to be, right? Before the Industrial Revolution, all cities were about 8 square miles. So a little around 3 miles on the side. Very small. And that's every city. That's London, that was Babylon, that was ancient Jerusalem, that was all the capitals of ancient China, that was Kaifeng, that was Luoyang, that was Tenochtitlan in Mexico. That was everything, every single thing. And it was a structural constraint, because that was about everything was constrained by the quality and extent of our transportation systems. So back in the day, all you had was muscle. You had human or animal muscle. So basically, 3 miles was about as far as you could walk with a load on your back and still make it back where you were before. You go any bigger and then nobody could get around the city. You basically had to stay small, because if you went any bigger, you would not be able to actually take advantage of the size. The size became a difficult constraint. It became something that made it more difficult to just do basic tasks. You actually wouldn't be able to get any advantage from a bigger city, and in fact, people would just die, and it would be a real disaster. So that was as far as you could go on foot, and the bigger the city, typically the bigger the problems too. But what happened is that the Industrial Revolution changed this. It gave us new transportation technologies that in turn gave us newer and bigger cities. So it started with railroads, and then you got automobiles and highways, and it expanded and transformed cities in the process. They literally grew, and they grew in all sorts of different ways. In Europe, they're much more fond of the more compact, dense cities that often have rail systems underground to link it together. But a lot of those cities were actually built based on old medieval patterns back when things were much smaller. So they were often smaller cities. They actually never were able to expand or develop in response to the automobile and the highway. In the United States, North America, you had these massive cities, massive amounts of land, and you had these cities that began to sprawl out and to literally follow the roads, initially the railroads, and then the highways and other roads to adopt a new form. And you've got this sprawling suburban structure, because that is actually, it makes sense. It doesn't necessarily make sense, but this was the enabling technology that made cities big. This is what allowed them to get so big. And yeah, it created all sorts of weird problems and social issues and heinous design choices. All that is really true. But the fact is, before then, cities used to be 8 square miles. This was the big change, and it was energy. You needed energy sources to power all of these machines and to make all of this possible. So this is what enabled these cities, right? All the cities we see in the world, whether they're in Africa, India, North America, Asia, all of these cities are modern industrial products. They wouldn't exist, actually, without the industrial world, without industrial technologies and agriculture that pulled people out of the farms and put them into cities, or the industrial tools, technologies, and transport systems that enabled larger cities to actually house these people in the first place. Gotta always remember that there's no non-industrial city in the modern world. And what happened is that globalization, which expanded all the technologies that were traditionally contained within well-resourced countries, wealthy countries, it expanded them all around the world. And it made these cities possible all around the world. And for a long time, any sort of city seemed possible anywhere. You were expanding in Mumbai, all in India, in Indonesia, China, everywhere. Cities just seem like the natural thing. And in many ways they are. But there's also strong limits on what anyone can build. You can't just build anything anywhere. You can't do it in any backwater of Western China or Central Africa or anywhere you want. It's just not that easy. We've had a very special moment where you had the resources, the capital flows, the benign security environment, the abundant energy, the low costs, the quality demographic infrastructure to make all this happen. Now we're not going to have any of that. And so a lot of this is going away. And this whole project, this whole Neom project, which says that it's the future of construction and design and the future of everything, this is a vision of a world that is already long gone. This can't happen anymore. And all of these things that we were expecting the whole world to have, which is just embodied in this, where you have all of these ridiculously overhyped marketing buzzwords, the circular economy, future-proof this, cognitive cities, low-carbon sustainable construction, all these things that are great to happen in a world of abundant energy, cheap capital, quality labor forces, young labor forces, cheap labor forces, all of that. All of this is now on its way out. And this project is really actually just a survival of a totally different world. So MBS is a guy who's probably grew up on the same fantasy, and he just can't let it go in a lot of ways. Can't let it go. But it's going to be let go because this isn't going to work. So just keeping that in mind always, that the actual story of why we have these great cities, it has nothing to do with most of the things we think about. It's, again, a product of industry. It's a product of the Industrial Revolution. And a lot of parts of the world aren't going to be getting the benefits of the Industrial Revolution not too long from now. So it's a really difficult thing for all of us to pull ourselves out of these fantasies, out of these computer-generated images, these crazy architectural renderings, which are totally fake and have lighting from like 15 different directions, which isn't how it works, and back into the way things really are, which is really painful. It's like deciding that you don't want to be in a video game, don't want to just be living in a video game anymore, or just playing video games all day long. You actually are going to be trying to work and build something that's not going to have crazy 10x, 50x growth rates like you see in everything, like you see in technology sectors or just in general in a lot of areas, basically since the start of the Industrial Revolution. It's going to be different. But you look at really what we're talking about here. Let me pull this up again. When you actually look at this is a place we're supposed to believe that one of the great cities of all of human civilization, right? This is the thing about what this really is. This is basically Saudi Arabia, which has never been a center. This is basically an oil petrostate, the world's greatest petrostate, saying it's going to build civilization's greatest city ever. And it's going to do it in a place that has no natural economic benefits. So I haven't done any real courses or videos on a lot of this stuff yet, but there are very few great ports or centers for agriculture or industry or economic activity anywhere around here. And even in the Eastern Mediterranean, it's pretty far away, so I'm not going to do it, but there is not a single strip of useful anything in this area, and that's why humans have never settled here. A lot of history is actually, when you look at the patterns of history, they're basically telling us what mattered. What parts of the earth did humans decide were worth settling and investing time in, and basically bleeding and dying to try and grow, expand, or control? That is a pattern that's telling us what mattered, and some of what's happened with globalization is that we've totally forgotten even why things happened where they did. Why did Germany become so powerful? Why did Japan have to go to war? Why is the United States so ridiculously overwhelming to most other countries? Why is a place like Afghanistan just a perpetual wasteland, right? What is changing? What happened? These things have been forgotten. And so we can suspend our disbelief pretty easily because we don't even remember what makes things possible. But if you went back before 1945 and asked any diplomat in any country for the last 300 years if they thought anything would ever be built here, everyone would say no. And the only thing that's changed, really, it's the same thing actually with China. The only thing that has changed, has prevented everyone from saying a place like China will just be warring with itself forever, is industrial life, is industrial technologies, and then digital technologies, and all the things that go with it. You take that away, and quite literally, there's not a single thing that makes this an interesting or viable place for development. And I think it's important to see some of the important stuff. Let's see. Okay, so check this out. This is just a map. There's a population density map of the Middle East. It's actually not most of Saudi Arabia, but this is fine. So population density just tells you number of people. I'll move that here so you can see Egypt there. Number of people per square unit, whatever, for unit area. So here you have Egypt, and the spikes here just tell you how many people. The idea is the more vertical it is, the more people there are. More spiky and vertical. Saudi Arabia is totally empty. And if you go through all of human history, this was Egypt, this was the Levant, this was the Fertile Crescent, this is Persia, these are the Anatolian tribe states, this is Byzantium, these are the Greek, there's the Greek, Ionian, all those sorts of city-states all along the Aegean there. That is the story of this region, right? This is where people congregate. There's very good reasons why. If you look down near the Red Sea in the bottom left, that is where Neom is supposed to be built. And once more, there's absolutely nothing there. And there's not going to be anything there anytime soon, right? It is just that simple. And so if we look at Saudi Arabia itself, often population density might be the most important quantitative metric. Let me pull this away. So population density is probably the most important quantitative political metric there is. It's one of those fundamental, simple ones that is at the root of everything, right? It actually tells you so much, so much more than we ever would realize. And so here's a map of population density of Saudi Arabia. You see here, this is Riyadh, the political capital, etc. Along the east coast there's some oil fields, blah, blah, blah. Basically have the Riyadh there in the middle, and then you have this coast. And there's Jeddah, which I was mentioning earlier. That's actually even larger than Riyadh. Very important. It's really in a lot of ways, the economic, commercial, the everything center of Saudi Arabia. And again, why, right? Here's Saudi Arabia. Why is it that the city of Jeddah, which is Neom is trying to replace, why is it that Jeddah is the most important city? It's not Mecca or Medina, although realistically, Mecca is really close to Jeddah, but that's not really the important thing. The question is, why is it that if this is the political capital, if this is where the House of Saud wants control and authority and everything to be, why is it that Jeddah is the most important city in Saudi Arabia? Well, it's geography. This is the place with the port. This is the one place in all of Saudi Arabia where you actually get some economic integration, some economies of scale, some labor differentiation. This is the only place you get it. You get all sorts of distribution, shipping benefits. You get the things that make anything large and civilized possible, right? And it's not even that great. It really, really is not even that great. It's a good, we'll do a quick travel here. So obviously there's a lot of traveling, but here we go. Here's another city that's also great. It's actually legitimately great. Notice here, there's not just a tiny little river. So this is Istanbul. There's not just a tiny little port. This is like an entire city that is, that hugs this coast. And there's I think it's the Golden Channel, Golden something like that. There's the part of the Bosphorus. And then you have the Bosphorus, you have bridges, you have both sides of this city. And this is one of the wealthiest cities in human history, right? It actually is part of basically an enclosed sea. This is the Sea of Marmara. And so you basically have, there's a lot of mountains around here. It's relatively enclosed. It has its own little aquatic playpen here. It can control access into the Black Sea. This is the sort of place that is deeply strategic, deeply valuable, and functional. And it has problems too. This is an extraordinarily hilly place. It's actually very bad to develop. There's very few parts of urban Istanbul that are even flat. Actually, Tahrir Square, famous Tahrir Square. Wait, Tahrir Square? I think it's Tahrir Square. I might be thinking of the one in Egypt, but there's a famous square. Let's see if we can pop it up, actually. We're here. We are here. So it's down here. It is, let's see, Taksim Square. That's what it is. Yeah, Taksim Square. This, anyway, we don't need to get too into it, but this is one of the only flat pieces of land in urban Turkey because it is so, in urban Istanbul, because the city is so hilly. So that's actually a real problem for development. You actually want water, you want port infrastructure, you want a harbor, you want a lot of opportunities for water transport, but you also want a flat region. But you can't have everything, right? So Turkey has a lot, Istanbul has a lot, but you go back to Saudi Arabia and it has almost nothing. And the one thing it does have, which is Jeddah. Let's see if I can find it without the map on. Ooh. Let's see. How much lower is it? I feel like it is down here. Nah, I can't find it. Let's see. Let's see how close I was. Oh no, it was up this bad. Yeah, so Jeddah, it has almost nothing. You compare it to Istanbul, it's a tiny little flick of a port. And this is the sort of place that, again, if you didn't need it, if you didn't have a state that was really trying to run with it, this isn't the greatest piece of coastal infrastructure the world has ever seen. And Saudi Arabia knows that. That's why it's trying to build a crazy structure. But nonetheless, that ain't going to work because it's not cost effective for all Jeddah has problems. It's still a roughly natural, although it's almost certainly an industrial port. Yeah, it even looks like one. This is still the place in Saudi Arabia where real business and life happens, because it's actually functional, it's economic, and there's really nothing in Neom that is like that. And you can actually see that. The whole idea to have a giant line as a city, this line basically just going all the way across here, part of the reason it's doing that is because that actually might be, in a crazy way, more viable than trying to make an entire city here, because there's just so little to support it. I mean, there might be arguments to be made. They might be making that in the architecture firms, in the design firms, consulting firms, land use planning firms, all this stuff. That maybe this line is actually better because this place is so inhospitable to human life otherwise. I mean, I'm not going to take that argument, but it is actually a pretty real thing. And so, we're going to start wrapping up here, because I just wanted to talk about this ridiculous city. It's great. I mean, I have a background in this stuff, and so it's just crazy sometimes when I see these hilarious things still being sprouted and talked about everywhere, like the world hasn't really changed. But that is the way things are. So Neom is one of these, here, I was going to show you guys. Neom is one of these things that is being peddled based on all of these illusions. There's money, there's slick marketing, and then there is a lot of hope and dream and fantasy involved. And a lot of people are buying, right, slick renderings, a lot of video game futurism. I mean, China has been overrun by this for years now. And we're in a weird place where MBS sees this as a lot as his legacy, at least as his pyramids. So it might really have legs, which is kind of a annoying, freaky thing. But ultimately, Neom, for all it wants to pretend otherwise, this whole thing is a dodge. It's a head fake. Saudi Arabia's economy is never moving off of oil. There is nothing else. They've never been able to even create the infrastructure for anything else, right? Russia talked about moving away from natural resources for the last 30 years. Didn't move anywhere in that direction. It's the same thing with Saudi Arabia. It doesn't have any of the infrastructure required, and even a fancy city wouldn't create that industry when there's no real manufacturing sector, there's no trained labor force, there's no real workforce at all. The whole thing, any city that's built, even if you build like a weird tent city in the Northwest, no one's allowed to take pictures of because it embarrasses the king. This would still be something just be built on Eastern Saudi Arabian oil wealth. There's nothing else there. There's no sustainable consumption. There's no employment base. And the whole thing is at root just a farce and a fantasy. And a lot of people are making money hand over fist in the West over this, because it's like, why not? Saudis are crazy people, just the same way the golfers are taking Saudi money to compete with the PGA Tour. There's a lot of kind of slightly washed up or down on the luck golfers who are going to take the money because why not? The Saudis don't know what to do with their money. They kind of just get ideas in their head and they start going for things. They start funding madrasas here and random groups in Indonesia there. And they kind of do what they want. And it can have a lot of impact because there's just so much money sloshing around. But this, attempting to create the greatest city in human civilization, no. It ain't going to happen. It requires way more than Saudi Arabia has. And China really shows this. I mean, people don't know as much, but China's built over 600 major cities. And most of them, we're going to see in the next 10 years, they don't have the industry needed or the agriculture to support the sort of urban zone they've created. There is so much urban life that is not well tuned to the economic realities of these places. And if you don't have exports, you didn't have the construction industry, you didn't have heavy industry in China, a lot of this would become clear. And even in the United States, even in a lot of Western countries, the problems with deindustrialization are actually telling us certain things. A lot of countries have done a lot better during the context of deindustrialization than others. And some, even like the United States, for all it had huge problems, painful dislocations, real traumas inflicted on it. Its labor force, its urban zones, all that. Overall, there was still a capacity to adopt to the changing service environment we see in North America today, which is evolving itself. But there was an ability to adapt to it, while a lot of places were not able to adapt. and it's much harder to just build industry out of nowhere and expect it to work. So places like Neom can't be justified at all. That is really the final answer here. And the one thing it can do, though, is it's just great for PR. This is a great move if you're trying to deflect from whatever you have to be doing, whether it's funding terrorists or beheading people or barbecuing journalists, whatever is really going on in Saudi Arabia. You can distract all this with a grand, modernist, futurist vision about what the future is going to be like that sells people in the West on all of their fantasies, that reads the target audience well, creates a profile of what they want, and then markets it directly to them. That's a huge part of what's really going on here. And, Saudi Arabia wants to convince people that it's going to be Dubai, and it wouldn't actually mind being the Dubai of, say, 2006. It wouldn't mind. But the truth is, Dubai isn't even going to look as good as it does in a few years. There's huge problems coming everywhere. And the idea that Saudi Arabia is going to do a little Dubai move, a little shift like Dubai did 20, 15 years later, it ain't going to happen. This city isn't getting built, and the desert out there is going to stay as sandy as ever. So I am going to leave it there. We've been going for about 60 minutes, a full hour. For everyone who's watching, I appreciate it. Definitely, this was definitely a good episode. I've got to talk about real estate, land use, development, things that I can't resist because I spent a lot of time working in that field. So it's good. One of the key takeaways to think about as this wraps up is that we're entering a new world of everything here. But one thing that's really changing is development, patterns of development and financing, and all these things we talked about, the growth of cities, the change in transportation systems, the evolution of city styles of urban development patterns, move from small-scale cities to suburban ones, all these sorts of shifts. They're also going to change. We're entering a world of aging labor forces, of new autonomous AI technologies, which they're not going to be really useful in a lot of the world. They're basically not going to exist because you're not going to have the energy, you're not going to have the systems to implement them. But in North America, at least, it is a real thing. So there's real changes, and I am angry, or I'm emotionally captured by something like Neom, because it is one of these projects that is just, it is the fantasy that keeps us from seeing what's really coming. It's one of these totally harebrained things that 10 years from now we're going to look back and be like, how could we even be listening to these articles, right? And if there wasn't money in Saudi Arabia, nobody would really be listening to it. But I hope that cutting this project down to size a little bit, which we did in this quick sort of fun, ad hoc way, looking at some of the basic geography, topography, economic realities of Saudi Arabia, its history, the patterns of development, and what it can actually expect, and how it actually got everywhere it got, because A, it gave resources, it gave energy resources that funded industrialization, then it was able to absorb not just the capital, but then all the goods it needed to develop itself into an industrial state, most of it coming through that port of Jeddah. And then now it even has a fantasy that it can reconfigure the landscape to make, using industrial technologies to build something that's never been seen. And that's a great vision, and maybe a place like the United States really wishes it had that vision. China's had that vision for a very, very long time. It's done some impressive things with it. So we all wish we had something like a Neom, some grand vision like that in the West. So I get that people are talking about it, but we do need to get that vision here. We can't be absorbing these crazy visions. It's really like we'll end up like shamans, like medicine men, because this is not something that's going to happen. We're going to end up with like AR, VR headsets on our heads, just staring into the Neom reality, because the actual thing that we're seeing is a lot of decay in a lot of cities, right? This is the physical world that doesn't look as good as we want, while the digital renderings that we can just create just like that. You can just snap your fingers, make something totally beautiful, amazing, seductive and enchanting. But the actual work of getting things done in the world, much more difficult. But it isn't all that grim. There are great opportunities everywhere, especially here in North America, and I'm going to be going over a lot of them. So pretty soon we're going to do a little bit more about industry, right? Keep talking about the technology that makes everything we know possible, even though we don't like it. We wish it was prettier. We wish things were a little better. That is still the real thing. But there's a lot of news going. There's Nancy Pelosi is trying to go to Taiwan. The Chinese GDP statistics are probably going to be adjusted down for the first time. Xi Jinping is trying to become a third-term president. You know, you have debt crises building overseas, debt crises building in China. There's a whole thing I need to talk about finance. The whole world of finance is one of those things that is totally changing, and it's been totally unmoored from reality the last 75 years. And now we've all come to accept the norms of, let's see if that'll arrange itself. Anyway, the norms of finance as, the recent norms of finance as the norms of finance, the actual way that finance happens and has happened historically. And that is just so far from the case. We are living in something very special. We're really living in the lightning, as a really smart writer named Jacob Shapiro once said. I think that's a really key word here. So that is really a wrap for me. So I was going to be broadcasting tomorrow, but I think I'll skip that one. I got so excited to talk about Neom that will probably get pushed. We have a few more great talks. We're going to be doing a bit about oil and coal and iron and the whole story of why certain places industrialized. Probably a bit more current events. I think people are really enjoying some of the more topical stuff. Yeah, you always want the history, but people also want to know exactly what's happening now. And it's tough when the history matters so much, but you really got to hit those topical notes. We'll definitely be doing that. And with that, I think we have mostly covered it. I hope everybody has a good week, good weekend, a good everything. And with that, I will see you guys next time.